U.S. manufacturers are starting to feel the pinch from the conflict in the Middle East with spiking energy prices and spiraling costs. These impacts are compounding an industry that faces uncertainty over tariff policy and a weak labor market. Let's get a pulse on the sector with Jay Timmons. He is National Association of Manufacturers President and CEO. Jay, it is always great to see you. So let's start there, Jay, with the war with Iran. I'm just curious, Jay, what you are hearing from manufacturers. What are they telling you about input costs, Jay, and potential margin impact? What are you hearing?
That is such an open-ended question, Josh. Thanks for asking it. But the bottom line is manufacturers are always dealing with something, right? So we are focused on the cost of doing business. And if you look back over the last several years where we got certainty on the tax front, we've got regulatory modernization. Until the war, we had some really good certainty in terms of energy development, although we need permitting reform. Our workforce issues are still out there, 400,000 open jobs in the sector. Tariff policy is still uncertain. So the war has added, clearly, some pressure, price pressure when it comes to energy costs. We use actually a third of the nation's energy. So every time energy costs go up, that adds to cost pressures on manufacturers, hurts the bottom line of manufacturers. There's no doubt about that. Having said that, our manufacturers are fairly optimistic about the future because we have laid the groundwork for positive competitiveness policy here in this country.
The concern, Jay, is that you kind of see this price shock evolve to a supply shock. And so I'm curious, when you're talking to manufacturers, are they telling you about, hey, yeah, we're already dealing with potential shortages?
You hear it sometimes. So that actually is more related, I would say, to our uncertain trade policies that are out there. Manufacturers are very focused on getting USMCA reauthorized and renewed because so much of the supply chain is right here in North America. The energy shock, as you called it, the cost pressures coming from energy, it adds another dimension to that. But I would say if you had to ask, if you ask manufacturers what they're most concerned about, it would be certainty in the tariff and trade policy area. That doesn't mean that the energy costs are not of concern, but I think they're looking at those as more of a temporary issue. And our hope is that on the tariff front, that will be resolved soon as well.
You know, Jay, we talk a lot about our supply chains. I think you and I have actually talked about supply chains on this show. Do you consider this, Jay, is this the first real post-COVID test?
No, I don't think so. I think there's an ongoing test when it comes to where manufacturers locate their supply chains or source from, and that goes right back to trade uncertainty. So if, for instance, if you have policies that are encouraging manufacturers to bring production or bring their supply chains from Asia to the North American continent, then that's a good thing. That's what we saw after 2019 in the USMCA trade agreement. If, on the other hand, you now suddenly have some uncertainty about that agreement after manufacturers have invested literally billions of dollars to do exactly that, that's where I think you have the potential shortages and shocks because they don't really know, manufacturers really don't know which way to turn in the long term. Short term, sure, but manufacturers invest and they plan for years and decades in the future.
You mentioned tariffs, Jay. Let's talk more about that dynamic because the Supreme Court, of course, they struck down the Trump tariffs. What are you hearing from manufacturers about that issue?
Yeah, so they struck down the emergency, the use of the IEEPA, the emergency powers to impose tariffs, but they did not strike down the 301, 232, and 122 tariffs that the administration is using right now. And what we're in my estimation, is we're in a period of planning, I would hope, for the administration to determine what their policies are going to be moving forward. So the 122s were imposed for a small period of time, for a few months, until the administration could determine what they're going to do on the 301 and 232 front. Now, let me just say this. I mean, we're talking about added costs to manufacturers, which means added costs for consumers. We know that this president is committed to tariff policy. Now, whether you like that or you don't like that, that is frankly irrelevant. It is going to occur in this administration. The question for manufacturers is, how do we plan for that in the future? So that's where we need to see certainty, but we need to know what the rates are, what countries are going to be tariffed, what products are going to be tariffed. When we have that information, then I think you're going to see an unlocking and an unleashing of pent-up demand or pent-up optimism to actually invest in growing manufacturing and jobs here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm interested in that point, Jay, because listen, Trump, as you say, he likes tariffs, in part because he wants to incentivize reshoring, of course, of manufacturing jobs. Are you seeing evidence of that, Jay?
So that is definitely his objective, and that is his working theory. Yes, I think, look, to be fair, do we see it in all sectors? No. But you certainly see it in pharmaceuticals. And the pharmaceutical, and I was just in Indianapolis at the Lilly facility, where they are expanding exponentially. Other pharmaceutical manufacturers have invested significantly in the American economy now. They're doing it as we speak. They not only broke ground, but they're building the buildings. What we haven't seen is kind of the next step to a lot of other investment announcements that have occurred, and that means shovels in the ground. And as I said, there's a lot of optimism, pent-up optimism is what I call it, but there is a bit of a pause in actually moving those investments forward until we see certainty on the trade front. And look, to be fair, amazing certainty when it comes to tax policy. If we'd have looked back 10 years ago, Josh, and we would have said that American manufacturers and the American business community overall had this type of a competitive tax policy, we would have said that's not possible in this country. But it is because of 2017 and 2025 and President Trump's leadership. Regulatory modernization, that has been a long time in coming, and we're seeing bipartisan support for lowering the cost of regulations on manufacturers. $50,000 per employee per year in compliance costs for small manufacturers, that's not sustainable. With that bipartisan support, that is going to propel us into the future to modernize those regulations. And lastly, I would say permitting reform. I'm very excited that we seem to have some bipartisan support for true permitting reform that will allow us to get shovels in the ground more quickly. We're seeing incredible leadership from Senator Whitehouse, Senator Heinrich on the Democratic side in the Senate, from Senator Lee and Senator Capito, especially on the Republican side. And I am very optimistic we're going to get this done this year.
Jay, I'll end here. What does job growth, Jay, look like for the American manufacturing sector now and ahead? Quantify it for us, Jay. And I'm curious, what are the kinds of manufacturing jobs you think will be most in demand?
Yeah, so those are several questions, but let me try to answer it this way. Over the course of the last year, job growth has not been as robust as we want. In fact, we've lost jobs in the manufacturing sector. However, in this quarter, or the first quarter of 2026, we've actually started to see job growth tick up, which is very, very good news. And I think you're going to see that continue. In the future, we've always talked about the need for technicians and other specialists in the manufacturing field. What I will say to you, Josh, is I'm not sure we know exactly what jobs we're going to need in the future because of the advent of AI. AI is going to change the dynamics of the manufacturing workplace. It is not going to mean fewer jobs in manufacturing. It is actually going to mean more. We're going to need 2.1 million jobs before the year 2033 in the sector. And many of those jobs are going to be related to technology and to the implementation of AI. By 2030, 80% of manufacturers will be using AI. Right now, that number is about 50%. And those jobs are going to change the types of jobs that manufacturers utilize. The Manufacturing Institute, which is our workforce and education partner here at the NAM, just received a $10 million grant from Google, and we're going to be using that to help train manufacturing workers on AI and how to utilize AI to increase productivity and output for manufacturers here in the United States so we can be the best in the world, as we always have been.
Jay, as always, great to have you on the show. Thank you, sir.
Great to be here.